Good afternoon. My name is Tim Markle. I'm director of the Southern Regional Center for Children and Youth with Special Healthcare Needs, one of 5 regional centers throughout Wisconsin. The Southern Regional Center serves 14 counties in southern and southwest Wisconsin. This is Conversations on Showing Up for Kids, and we just try to gather together, talk about things that matter, and share information, share new information, or share ideas. Sometimes it's what works. Sometimes it's what worked for us yesterday, but isn't working with us today. Sometimes it's what we're going to try next because that just didn't work. So we are open to all sorts of sharing. So today our topic is communicating with your school. And I did try to have a couple people on the panel so that we could get things started off. A couple people were with me last week. And if you listen to the recording last week, they already started this conversation, which I then said, stop, I have to have something to talk about next week. So they did, because they're really wonderful people. But I'm thinking, looking at the people that are here, I know Pearl and Rose, you were with us last week. Do you want to introduce yourselves? We'll go in alphabetical order. So Pearl.
Hi, my name is Pearl Fessenden. I'm a mom to 5 kids, and I'm in really northern Wisconsin.
We have adopted Pearl into the southern region because she is just so friggin' awesome. So yeah, you get to be part of the southern region as well, because we really like you. And Rose.
Hey, I'm Rose Cutting, mom of a teenager in southern Wisconsin.
All right. So I think the other person was Sandy, was with us last week, right? If I remember right. Okay, so she is probably working on joining us from the room next door. But let's go ahead and get started. And I want to get started with, you guys had brought up a couple ideas last week. Do you remember what those were? A couple of things that you talked about with communicating with schools last week. And we can start with that.
I remember bringing up that I was able to build up a really good relationship with my kids' IEP teams, and in parent engagement, I had asked in the IEP meeting if we could have texting as a form of communication, because sometimes emails are just, it's hard to get to, or they get drowned out, or, I've got 300 that I've got to sort through for different things, and I'm sure teachers have even more. So, and sometimes a phone call doesn't work. So if they're able to just shoot me a quick text on either something that happened or something that really good's going on, or I can text them that, hey, he's having a rough morning, or she's having a rough morning, it kind of gives them a heads up without actually taking up too much of each other's time.
So Pearl, I'm just going to ask you to elaborate on that a little bit. Why do you feel it's important to sort of let the school know if the child's having a sort of a rough morning or not? I mean, don't you hope the school just realizes this and knows it? What's the point of this communication?
Nobody's a mind reader. And my son's nonverbal, so it's not like he can just tell you that he's having a rough day. And my daughter's verbal, but when she's having that rough of a time, it's hard for her to express herself. I don't want them to be, in essence, emotionally sideswiped when my kids get off the bus. If they know that my kids are struggling that morning, they can plan accordingly. And they've got a few moments to kind of figure out, either with staffing issues, because we know staffing issues is an issue statewide. They can kind of figure out who can watch what room and plan accordingly. Is there another kid that might be having a rough time that, they can kind of double up on? Who maybe has a free period that morning for a meeting that might have gotten canceled, that can maybe help my son or my daughter kind of regulate their emotions when they get there. Because they ride the bus, I also inform transportation. So I'll let the bus company know, and they can radio into the bus driver. So the bus driver is aware too that something might be going off, because we have things in place that they can do on the bus when they're dysregulated. So I just think it's important. I would want that heads up too. I wouldn't want my kid to come home and then me just thinking everything's going to be groovy and we're going to do our usual routine stuff, and then come to find out that all my plans are out the window and I'm scrambling.
I'll just kind of jump in real quick, Tim, because Pearl said something that totally led into a document that I started talking about last week, and then you asked us to wait, so we waited. But also I sent it to you in an email if you want to take a look at it and somehow attach it to this. And that is, there is this document that has blank spaces, and basically it's kind of a communication order of how your school would like you to inform them if you have to get a hold of them in a non-regular way. And that is, you know, like those morning things of, hey, schedule change, either that morning or that afternoon or something. So it's kind of a neat document to take in and have just an open conversation, an easy conversation starter of, you know, if I need to contact somebody kind of in a, not like an emergency that it's a lights and sirens emergency, but you might want to know this, then it actually is that really nice conversation starter in a way to know real easy how to get a hold of somebody and communicate effectively and, you know, without bothering the wrong person. That being said, whereas Pearl's folks are like, yep, text us and everything, there are school districts and there's even different teachers and different philosophies within the same school district that one year you might have their personal cell phone number and text them. And the next year it might be, we'd rather you do it this way instead. So that document is really nice and really handy for that easy start of the school year. Because, you know, like Pearl said, she's kind of in a rural area or a remote area. We are as well. So, you know, it's kind of like I could literally go out our back deck and hold a sign up like, you know, I think mariners do it, like different color codes of what the waters are like, right? Yeah, right. So that's as close of a relationship as we have with our school as they can literally see our back deck. However, for those of you in a bigger school district, and I'll be curious to see what Sandy says about her district, she comes from a larger one. You might want to have an actual pre-meeting going into school. So that way everybody's starting off on the right foot.
Yeah, so Sandy, I know that you're in Fitchburg and you were with us last week. And how Fitchburg's slightly larger than Fenimore and the Great White North. And so I'm just wondering what sort of stuff with you and your parents do you consider when you talk about communicating with your school?
Well, first, can I just make a quick comment on the resource that Rose was just talking about, and that Tim, you put in the chat, the website. So I pulled that up. There we go. And what I loved about the second page and thought would be really cool for families to adapt for their situations would be when it says like who I can talk to. It has great place to put the contact info of each person, but maybe also why you would contact this person over that person, who you would contact for which things. I thought that could be really beneficial. And that's something that maybe the family could actually even bring that in and work with their special education teacher to figure out sort of like the who, why, when, and where. So for instance, I was thinking, just sort of the general, we had a good morning, or it was a little rough, but it seems fine now. That might be communicated to one person, whereas it might be, you know, we are in full meltdown mode here. We barely got on the bus. We barely, you know, that may be where potentially, depending on the child in the district and all that kind of stuff, that may be something where maybe the OT needs to come in and help the child re-regulate. Maybe a special ed assistant needs to take that child to a room where they can regulate. Maybe, I don't know, maybe the school psychologist needs to get involved. I don't know how it would be for that particular environment, but that would be maybe a good thing to have a conversation about. And I would think that that could happen maybe it doesn't have to be at an IEP meeting, but that might be a really great place to kind of problem solve that as a group. Who's got the skills, who's got the time, who's got the ability to do those particular things, and who, so everybody can take some ownership of it too, and say, this is what I can offer, and these are the circumstances under which I would be a good person to call. So that's kind of what I think about, is how do you work together to come up with things that work well about communicating. I was telling Tim earlier today about how I think it's really helpful for the families to have contact with each other, so that they can work together to identify if something is a more systemic issue and then get that addressed, because sometimes things are systemic and you need, people need to know that it's affecting more than one family. If we're each just doing it on our own, we may not realize that it's a bigger issue. We may think, oh, okay, we'll just have to figure it out on our own. And then you find out, so is every other family. Maybe there's something that we can propose. Maybe we can come up with a solution. So we have challenges with the bus system in our district where, and I think this is, it's an issue of there's not enough bus drivers, gas is expensive, they're trying to be as efficient as they can. So one year they tried to get all 7 kids who rode the bus on the same bus in the morning, and just, you do the math and there's just no way to do that. There literally was no way to do it. First of all, 2 kids were in wheelchairs and then the other 5 were not, and they were trying to do spacing out for pandemic issues. Physically, there's just not enough space. Time-wise, there wasn't their timeline of who they pick up where, when, and you just simply Google map it and the math didn't add up. So, it was helpful that I knew at least 2 of the other parents, and we all sent emails saying, this isn't working. Our kids are not getting to school until a minimum of 20 to 45 minutes late for class. They're arriving dysregulated. This is not working. So it was nice that we collectively said, this is a problem. This needs to be solved. This year, none of us have been told what time the school buses will come to pick them up. School starts tomorrow. So one of the moms reached out to me and said, have you heard yet? I said, no. She goes, okay, no one's heard. So then she sent an email all the way up to the superintendent. She texted us all back and said, by the way, this is what I've done. I've blind CC'd you. Then I get another text about 10 minutes later, and she said, 5 minutes after that, I got a response that they're going to deal with it today. So it was nice to know that we kind of worked collectively in a way, but one person could spearhead it, the person who had the time and the energy in that moment. So having us as families have more connection to each other allows us to figure out how best to communicate. She sent one impactful message because she said, we have not heard this, versus I have not, where they're going to say, why are you not connecting with the special ed teacher or someone in the district or at your school building level? This is a bigger issue.
So it seems there's this communicating with schools, but it's also helpful to be communicating with other parents that have children in special education. But I know that that can be really hard with the desire to not let any personal information out that shouldn't be out there. And it may be very different from rural schools to the more urban or suburban schools, but do you guys have any suggestions on how to engage with other parents that have children with special help? Where do you run into them? Because I also know that, we don't always have our kids at all the community events because we don't always have the energy that our kids take to be at community events. And so it's not like we're always out and about. So how do you start those relationships so that you can improve the communication?
I'll go. For us in rural, middle of nowhere, we actually started because and it wasn't that a bunch of us parents got together and said it. It just kind of worked out to where a bunch of parents voiced the same thing without other parents knowing that they were also voicing the same issue. So that was kind of nice. They actually started having open house for the special needs kids prior to the actual open house for the rest of the kids. And so we got to meet other parents of special needs kids that way. We've also met some because we have adaptive sports like at the YMCA. And so we were able to meet other parents that way from other schools. Mine are high school and middle school. So I was able to meet like some of the elementary school moms, and so that was a nice way for us to kind of build up a thing. I would recommend parents also getting involved with their PTA or PTO. I did that up here. I was part of the parent advisory council up here, and it was crazy how many special needs moms were at that meeting. And we kind of all shared notes and kind of, discussed, whose IEP had what, and, what the diagnoses were and where our kids were and what we thought. And
Pearl, you were
we-
sharing personal identifiable health information with other parents.
yes,
That's what we do, isn't it?
yes.
That's what parents do.
Because here's the thing. I have no problem with telling others the diagnoses of myself or of my children. Why? Because my children disclose it. So if they don't have a problem with it, I don't have a problem with it. And I like to think that it helps families relate with me, and it helps schools be able to relate with me, because like, oh, okay, you're very open about, A, B, or C. That's great. We've had experience with A and B. Can you educate us a little bit on C? And what was crazy was before COVID hit, all of us special needs moms were running the pack. So we were the ones that were going in and excuse me, doing the fundraising and, helping pay for field trips. But we were also saying, hey, we want to have a special ed night for the teen night for the kids to come in and do trivia night before the rest of the kids come in. And if they want to stay later when the rest of the kids are there too, that's great. But we want to have more inclusive stuff. And that's just kind of how it started, was just disclosing and communicating and kind of just building that network.
I think that also reduces stigma. If everybody is trying to not let anybody know what's going on with their child, but other people can tell, it's easy for people to make assumptions or to feel like, oh, it's bad that. And it's like, no, we're trying to say our children are just who they are. They need to be fully included and they need to be able to participate. And this is what they need for that to happen. And that's a shorthand way of sometimes letting that be known. Now, I also say that with my daughter uses a wheelchair. So the second we show up anywhere, it's pretty obvious, so take that with a grain of salt, but that kind of like tells everybody right then and there. But I also feel like it then is kind of allows her to just sort of be like, hey folks, this is who I am. And then we can start from that point versus okay, why is this happening? How do we make sense out of this? It's just like, this is what she needs to be included and we're done. It just gets us much farther faster.
Sandy, I like how you brought up that, with the wheelchair, like they just kind of know, right? And it's true. Like I wish more families and schools realized that the children being in the school is in essence that safety net bubble to prepare them for life after school. And if we can't disclose it to the teachers and to peers and to the principal, how are we going to, disclose it to coworkers and supervisors and job interviews and to their care for when they're adults? And how do they learn it? By us. So if we can, show them how to do this and build that communication skill, and our kids see us doing this, I like to think that it's helping them in the long run.
I cannot disagree with any of that, Pearl. I love it. Rose.
I was just going to say, you guys are making me think of 3 points. One is we just had a back to school meeting for our son, to which he gets a whole new special ed director or caseload manager, right? And not knowing our family and everything, they sheepishly said, part of his day, we actually, during his life skills, we're going to start teaching him advocacy skills and, about his diagnosis and everything. And I'm like, yeah, thinking, you do know who I am and that we've probably already started, even if I've forgotten. I've had professional friends that are like, Rose, don't forget, you have to empower your son to know he's okay because of who he is, right? If for nothing else, dude, it's okay that you have to ask for a couple other things, right? And so I'm like, okay, yeah, perfect. This communication thing, they also need to be taught, like Pearl just said, you're fine. You are fine the way you are. You just might have to tell people, I'm going to thrive better in XYZ environment. Okay. You know what? I'm going to tell people I'm going to do that either verbally or non-verbally, right? If I'm in a meeting room and I'm getting cold, I'm putting a sweatshirt on. That's me communicating to you how I need to succeed in this meeting room, right? So that was the first thing you guys made me think of. The second thing is, I think we're kind of talking high expectations here. We as parents have high expectations of our child that they are going to be a thriving community member in, like, like was already discussed. You need to practice that in smaller, safe spaces more so than your counterparts or your siblings, which leads to my third point being, we have these wonderful things in these kids, most of these kids' lives called siblings, whether blood related or just church friends that have known our children from the beginning or what have you, right? And so if you're listening to this and you're like, identifiable information, it's making your skin crawl as us parents are talking, because we're freely talking about our children, right? Guess what? You can just sit there and listen to the kitchen table talk or the running them from one event to the next event, and they'll start naturally talking about other classmates who might fall into the IEP category you don't know about. Therefore, you automatically start finding out who these other kids are to start networking with the parents. Or you go to that parent, right? Because almost everybody will go to that parent, and they probably know all the other kids and families and can start networking with you. That being said, that parent might not have the energy to be the organizer of the group. So somebody else might need to spend that energy being the organizer.
So we discussed a couple strategies. One, for those days that maybe the school needs to be informed, and hopefully maybe if something occurs at school, the school is informing the family. We've talked about how a lot of communication can also get done between parent to parent and parents coming together to improve the communication. Do you have any ideas or strategies, or just that day-to-day back and forth with school to keep each other up to date on how the kiddo's doing?
Well, we have a communication log that we actually have. Now that my son's older, we're having him fill it out. But so the day is based on what he thought. So last year, for example, in science, for like a week, he came home and it said stinker on science. And I'm like, what is this about? And so I asked, like, hey, he's writing stinker, like, what's going on? Special ed teacher didn't know. Para didn't know, but the science teacher did. And it was because he had bent over, let one rip, Matthew heard it, and that was the nickname for the rest of the week. I thought that was awesome and hilarious and a way for them. But it was really interesting how he wrote it, and nobody really knew unless we kind of dove deep and we all wanted to know what this was about. And so when they're younger, communication logs are great. I like visual picture communication logs because a lot of times teachers don't have time to like fill in all these blanks and paragraphs, right? Like, or a checkbox. Did they eat? Yes. Did they throw a fit? Yes. Are they being a diva? Yes. I mean, whatever it needs to be a check mark of yes or no. And for my son now, we have it to where it's because we're trying to teach him emotions, we're having the faces, the smiley face, the meh face, and then the sad, angry face. And then we have it for each of his subjects. And he will, at the end of the class, the aide will remind him like, hey, remember, you've got to fill this out. And he'll circle what he thinks. And the teachers kind of get a kick out of it because they feel like they're being evaluated by him. Like, did we keep him entertained? Like in the Gladiator, are you not entertained? And so, but it's a good way again for them to kind of build that relationship with him and continue the communication, not just with me, but more also with him.
I will say we've ran the gamut too of early elementary, having kind of those pictures and just little brief boxes for the different parts of his day: lunchtime, recess, OT, PT, speech, general classroom, right? And then I can literally go to the totes of information about our son in our basement and kind of see how the time has gotten less for teachers to be able to do that, right? And so it's gone from these awesome folders of these blank documents that for every day, of the school year, there was one in there for them to fill out, to the point of a Google Doc that was pretty cool because it even involved his reg ed classroom teachers who could go in there and say, in case your son forgets, he has homework in world history tonight, right? And here's how you can help him, which was really cool because they could put in, the links to whatever they talked about in class and everything. Because although our son is verbal, he's not totally verbal and is definitely a visual thinker. So if it was all sit and get, he might have missed most of it, and so and he's a huge people pleaser. So knowing that if he didn't get his homework done, he would just keep stemming on it all night and probably not sleep. There go, the next day is not a good day, right? So we've gone through that to where last year, kind of because I wanted him to start taking ownership on how to text and how to email, starting those life skills and everything, I backed way off. I didn't ask for a Google document and everything. What I asked for and put it in his IEP was, hey, why don't you guys start, like Pearl said, why don't you start letting him figure out how to tell us how his day was or what homework he has, right? Because then it kind of falls on him / the reg ed classroom teacher to start communicating themselves and working together to make sure he's successful in his day or whatever follow-up. So we've kind of run the gamut. I will not kid you guys. There are many times things get missed with trying to empower him in it, but it's also kind of that mirror moment for him and us and his special ed team as to what skills to keep working on, because texting and following through with things in one location to a different location, that's life and job skills. So that needs to happen. But also with a Google document, one thing we found, because we went from one superintendent in all of this to a different superintendent, is that the new superintendent was very policy driven, and they actually put a kibosh to everything except for one form of communication, because our school lawyer said that that's what needed to happen. So no matter if you had a child with an IEP or not, you almost had to go in and have an emergency IEP meeting in order to get those paper or Google Docs to keep going. And then it had to be run through our school lawyers. So if some of you find yourself in that predicament, it's okay to keep pushing to try and get that information. It just might have to go through an IEP process for that, because, some things fall into the category of we don't know what we don't know, and that even falls for the school lawyers, right? So it might just be one of those parent-family relationship things they need to build on to keep making you successful. Now, you heard me say we went from one superintendent to another. Our old superintendent had a district-wide policy of no bad news gets sent home on a written anything, no email, no take-home folder, no nothing. And no parent gets a message left on any type of recording on a Friday afternoon, call me about your child. Because no parent will want to call a teacher over the weekend, right? No, you leave no message and nothing, even if it's good news, because somebody's going to worry and their kid's going to be the one all weekend. What did you do? Right? So if that happens, please feel free to communicate to your school, hey, remember what it was like to get that notification either from a boss or somebody, we need to talk. So if you get that a lot from your school, I really encourage you to follow the philosophy of our former superintendent of those rules. Bad information or any information that deserves a phone call and right away and not call me back.
Yeah, I'd like to say two things about what Rose was saying. I just love your idea, Rose, of saying, if we need to have an IEP meeting to get the information that we need to do that, because that's the way of accommodating our child's needs, our family's needs. I get that the district has like a kind of a traditional way of looking at things that they forget needs to be adapted to serve the needs of everybody, so that parts of the individualized education plan aren't literally just the exact things about how a child participates in their English class. It's everything that surrounds that allows for that. And that can be the communication systems and ways that go back and forth between the family and the school. So I think that's really great information to be like, you can continue to ask, even if they say this is our policy, you can say, but this is what we need and this is why. I also love the idea of, the more we have our kids do the communication, you're right, I hadn't thought about what that also helps the people they're communicating with learn about our child and their skills and where they're at and what's really going on. I know that like when my daughter, when we first did kind of the school from home over Zoom, that kind of stuff, it was just really interesting because I was helping her with so much more and than we had before, because she had SEAs and people to help her with stuff. And I realized she really wasn't as far along as we were kind of our impression was. And so I was having to help a lot with the communication back to the school of, she's not able to do this because of this is what's going on. And then partly because I was really tired of it, but also because I was like, wait, she needs to be telling them, not me. She needs to send the daily email with this link didn't open, this didn't work this way, this is why I couldn't access this is why I couldn't do this homework. Like, she needs to be sending that. And it taught her to advocate more for herself, right? And it taught her those skills of how to do that. But it also showed them that she was invested in her education and what she needed to be able to even communicate that information to them. When she would send an email that didn't make a lot of sense, I wouldn't correct it. I would let it go as is, because I felt like that's her showing them where she's truly at. Whereas I think a lot of times it's really easy for people to, particularly with someone like my daughter, who's really sweet and just really loves everybody, to want to just help her without realizing that that doesn't always help her in the long run. And so this was kind of eye-opening for some people, is like, oh, she does need more assistance than we're aware of. And then they could step in and help with that. So there's multiple pieces that how we communicate also helps people learn things, and how our kids communicate can really show where they're really at and what their needs are.
I really like the way that all of you are also pointing forward in the fact that improving communication also means helping the child learn how to communicate with the school. And just that's our goal, is to have adults with disabilities living their best lives, just like we want our children to be living their best life as well. We want the adults, we want our children to grow up to be adults and to live their best life. I would like to take a moment and open it up for Anna, Jesse, Rebecca. If you have any comments on this conversation, I probably should have said you could have inserted them at any time. Everybody's pretty relaxed, and I know some people do have a time frame, but we'll keep going here for a little while. So if you need to leave, I understand, and you have my gratitude. But Anna, Rebecca, Jesse, you can either unmute and I will notice that, or feel free to put any questions, comments, additions, ideas into the chat, and I will speak them for you if you're more comfortable that way. But we just want to make sure that you have space as well.
Well, I mean, I can share a little bit. So I work for the Madison School District, so I'm just kind of listening to hear different ideas. I was just brought into this role, so my title is Family Ombudsperson. So I help families that have students with IEPs if they have questions, concerns, they're looking for services within the community. So, I'm just kind of here listening to what other folks are doing. I'm also a parent to a 15-year-old son who's on the autism spectrum, who has very limited expressive language. So I appreciate hearing the different things that people are using. We use a lot of that stuff with his team as well. And I think a big thing that I've been trying to get out to staff is really that communication piece and figuring out what works best for families as far as how they want to communicate with the school, and then also to making sure that communication that's going out cannot always be negative, and being intentional about sending out positive communication or pictures or texts or anything, so that families aren't just hearing about bad stuff or negative stuff.
Or I think of in Rose's case, being led to believe that things are rainbows and unicorns, and when in fact there may be a couple of thunder showers and horses involved. And so making sure that communication is real. Other comments, ideas, or questions? And you certainly don't have to have one. No, there's no real pressure here.
I can add something that just dawned on me is for scheduling our IEP meetings, my husband has a very challenging schedule. And so what I do is I let them know up front, it's going to be hard to schedule with us. So we're going to need to look at about 3 months from now. So I try to tell them sort of, this is what I need to participate. I try to be very clear, or I need to know when she's going to have exams. I need to know this, I need to know that, because I have to schedule appointments. And I know you prefer me not to schedule them when an exam is, but if I don't know when an exam is, I have to schedule it 3 months in advance. I can only do what I can do. So I feel like we're finally getting a little bit better on our side of knowing how to do that. And so this past year, and I know it's not because of me, but I love that our school district did this. My daughter's in high school and we have day 1 and day 2 schedules. And so because it's a block scheduling system, on day 2, she does not have a 5th or a 7th hour academic class. She has academic resource or supported study hall at those times. So those are times I can take her out of school without her missing course content. She would miss support time to go through course content, but it's not actual missing the history class or the whatever the class is. So they actually gave us copies of the day 1, day 2 schedule. So I finally know, I can look and I can say October the 6th, that is a day 1. Okay. So she needs to have this appointment. Yes, we can do it anytime after this, versus me going, well, she gets out of school at 3:50. So I can pick her up a little early. Do you have a 4 o'clock? And they look at me like I have 3 heads, because they never have 4 o'clocks, So it's just, I feel like, I have for years said, the more information you can give me, the better job I can do. And I feel like they're starting to finally realize that. So I think part of it is the school has to realize that we balance so much more other things than just school. I've just kind of come to the realization that they need to realize we also have the same 168 hours in a week, but we have like 27 extra things to shove in there. So the more they can give us information, the more we can do things. And so by letting them know that, by communicating to them, I'm trying to balance all these things. This is why I'm asking for this information. I think it helps them understand the reasoning if we can say, this is the situation, versus coming in and saying, you're not telling me. If we can explain why it's valuable to us, I think it helps get them more like, oh, okay, I could do that. I could take the extra few minutes it would take to fill out that log saying how your child's day was. Because then that prepares you to know how to work with that evening. And is there anything you need to do to prepare your child to go to school the next day in a good place? You need to know, was there a massive issue with that other kid or at that time of day or whatever, so your child comes to school ready for the next day because you've had time to process it with them.
Tim, what Sandy just said is reminding me, and you might have to edit this, I don't know, but of your program called care mapping. Wouldn't it be awesome? Tim does this thing called care mapping where a parent sits and goes down through, and it's very eye-opening because you don't realize what you all have to do to be able to surround your child. What an awesome communication document you could also take into school then and have them realize what home life is for your child. So I don't know if that was a plug for you or I just got us in trouble, but I'm good either way.
Hey,
I do,
if you find me a venue, I'll be there.
I will. I do thank you all for this, but in full communication mode, I gotta go. Thanks,
Rose-
everybody.
Rose, I do take our care map in and show it. I do. I
Nice,
think it's really helpful. Yeah.
nice.
And just want to make sure everybody saw that Rebecca did have a thank you in the chat. So thank you for that. And that Jesse and Hannah are going to be connecting over Madison Metropolitan School District. So I just love the way that things happen that I don't plan. It's my favorite part of life. Any thoughts, comments, final thoughts?
Tim,
One
can
thing
you
I did
add-
want to bring up real quick, Sandy, you brought up the care mapping and so, and how you take it to every meeting. Another thing too is the differences with cultures is huge. So we're a minority. I know I don't look at. I'm undercover minority. So we have to educate on our native practices and what we do and what days they may not be able to attend school because we're doing ceremonial stuff. I'm also Hispanic and I have certain cultural obligations that the kids may not be at school for these certain holidays that are not necessarily observed by others, right? And so having the communication built in and kind of disclosing that again, it's opening yourself up to others. Yes, it's scary. Yes, as a parent, you're just like, oh my gosh, I don't want to self-disclose too much. Like, OMG. But if you don't, then you're no better off than you were if you hadn't. So what's the worst that can happen? That you're going to still be where you're at now? Okay, but more people are going to have an idea of what, of your background, of your needs, of the accommodations needed. The cost is worth the benefit that you can get from it. And if you're scared to do it, reach out to the agencies that are in the state. Reach out to your Parent to Parent of Wisconsin. Reach out to Wisconsin Facets to get information on how to communicate effectively with your school. Reach out to your regional centers because guarantee you they've seen it, done it, heard it, and probably have written a book or two on what to do. So disclosing is always a good thing. And it always opens it up for more questions because people are genuinely interested, want to know. And there's this little thing called family engagement that's being really pushed right now by districts. Take advantage of it. Get to know your staff, get to know your teams, and have your staff and your teams get to know you, your family, your kid, because what is it all for? It's for your kid. What is the goal? We want them to live the best life ever. Why? Because if they live their best life, I'm living my best life, probably at a casino.
You slay me, girl, just so you know. You just sometimes you just slay me. But I can't help but think one parent said, you know, the key is every year I try to find who my kid's champion is going to be that year in the school. So that I have that one person that I know is going to be on my side. Sandy?
Oh, I mean, that's so true. If we don't educate them, they can't accommodate our needs if they don't know what our needs are. It's just like our kids, right? So we as family have to let them know what our needs are. Our needs, like you were mentioning, if there's certain days that culturally you have events, obligations, things like that. So your family's not going to be there. So don't call me and say that's your IEP day. or don't be mad when the kid doesn't show up for school because, hey, you know that. And it's the same for us as family too. For us to participate in an IEP meeting, we might need to have certain things because of our needs. I don't know about you, but I have met so many parents that they also have health conditions, or they also have, their own disabilities or their own things that determine how they're able to effectively engage. And so we have to also, it's not just about engaging our children, it's about engaging our other family members that are important in that connection with the school and raising the child. And so, yeah, it's hard and it's scary sometimes to say to the school certain things because it can feel like I don't want them to know this much about me personally. But at the same time, we have to kind of work with them and so that they can work with us. And it's hard, but you're right. By letting them know what we need, then they can better fulfill that need. And then also, you can't really hold somebody accountable for something they didn't know that they needed to do. So it also gives you that, it's just not really fair. So it gives you that possibility if you need to do that. You can say, you know what, I communicated this to you and you did not respect that. And so what are we going to do about this? So yeah, it's kind of helping them help us.
Exactly. As parents, we're always saying that we would give the world for our kids, right? We would do anything for our kids. Well, this is part of it. It's opening up, being vulnerable, so that way our kids don't have to stay vulnerable.
I have nothing else to say beyond that. That was awesome. Thank you. I want to thank everybody for being here today. Pearl, Sandy, and Rose, thanks for doing a 2-week session with me, which is usually about 1 week more than people can stand. Jesse, Anna, Rebecca, I love that you are here today. Please feel free to spread the word. Hopefully you agreed to be signed up for emails from the Southern Regional Center. We'll let you know when upcoming trainings such as care mapping. We are working on having a few care mapping trainings with other family members going on this fall and then in the spring. So we're really going to give that a shot. Rose is efforting a brewery in Southwest Wisconsin to hold it. She just thinks that that's a great venue. And I'm not disagreeing with the family. So I'm going to agree with Rose and I will show up wherever she tells me to show up. So please keep your eyes open on that. We'll let you know when the next care mapping session is coming up. I will work. I'll try to get that on the books. This has sort of nudged me in that direction. So, knowing that I got a couple people that are interested, let's do it. So thank you all for being here. Really do appreciate it. I hope you can join us again in the future. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Talk to you, Jesse, later. Bye.